Today, we're happy to have Alain Lefebvre, the HR Director of Médecins Sans Frontières with us. Alain will give us an account of his personal experience in the field. I'll now hand you over to Alain to share a little more of his story. Alain, over to you.
Hi, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. So yes, my name is Alain Lefebvre. I'm French by nationality. I've been living in Norway for the last 11 years. I joined Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, that's the acronym I will use, MSF, in 2006. I worked quite a lot in the field. I've been deployed in 30 different assignments across the world. And in 2011-12, I decided to have a break for something important, which was family, and I got twins. Well, I did not, my partner got, but we got twins together. They're 8 years old. And then I started to work on bringing in mentoring and coaching in MSF until last year, where I decided to take this new role. It was just a year ago at the onset of the pandemic, COVID, that I took the role of HR Director for MSF Norway. And today I'm going to share some slides with you. I would like to, it's where I need to get used to the keyboard. Yes, I will share a personal story on, I think we could have saved even more life. We're always very self-critical in MSF. I will try to also, as a kind of a conclusion, how we as an organization are trying to become a better learning organization. And I would like to have your insights maybe on how pivotal is your learning culture, or how we should make it more pivotal. So here we go. I'm going to talk to you about Haiti in 2010 and 11, which was one of my last assignments. I'm going to talk about cholera outbreak. So I'm really sorry. I realized lately I took this case in the midst of a pandemic of COVID. There are some differences. Cholera is not a virus; it's a bacteria. So just that there will be a limited comparison between the cholera outbreak here and the COVID. But one thing is that cholera is a very virulent disease and it kills rapidly. So anyway, 2010, 2011, I was part of what we call the emergency unit of MSF, being deployed in less than 24 hours. I would be put in the plane, and that's what happened for the cholera outbreak. And this is a picture I took when I arrived in Port-au-Prince, the capital. And as you can see, that typically some kind of conditions that are favorable for the transmission, and where cholera bacteria likes to swim and contaminate others. Bringing a little bit about the context is Haiti is what we called in non-for-profit, but also in for-profit, the VUCA context is very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And this is a picture I took also during the operation during the cholera outbreak. Sorry, there was a lot of social, political activity, demonstration. And here it's a picture of a road blockade. They're burning tires and they're complaining against the government. And at the time, only we and also the International Committee of the Red Cross and the Red Cross, we were the only one to be allowed to cross this kind of barricade in the city when the city was really unstable. So not easy to respond to an outbreak, and especially not when it's a very unstable context. I forgot to say that actually it was my third time I was going to Haiti on that year, because if you remember well, there was the big earthquake in 2010. So I was also deployed on that particular catastrophe. It was quite intense. And then I went back into the summer as a country representative for a couple of months. And I came back later in the year for the cholera outbreak. So the first case, I will try to go quickly and not to be too technical. And by the way, we have few people, so you can just either you send a question through the chat, and Mike will help me, or you can open your mic and interrupt me anytime. We have some good time. So here is a short map. I was doing the mapping myself. This is the first case that came in October 2010. I wouldn't say in the middle of nowhere, but in the rural environment, out of a big city. Now, you will see how it goes very quickly, because after 4 weeks, this was all the operation where we were having MSF in the country. I could make a zoom in the city of Port-au-Prince. I need a laser or annotate. How can I get a pen so I can show? Can you see my mouse moving? Yeah. So Port-au-Prince, we were having already a lot of operation, but you see, we went pretty quickly as the cholera outbreak went really fast inside the country. And then this is another 8 weeks later, in January 2011. This was literally out of control. All the dots, and I will explain some of them, were all the operation that MSF was running related to cholera. We were having few programs 1 year after the earthquake, but very few. And all of these dots you're seeing, it's all operation related to cholera, where we were running cholera treatment center and isolation center. The small green man is exploration. That means we found out new cases and we're investigating to open a new medical infrastructure for cholera. The helicopter is simply when we found, for example, the first cases in that part of Haiti, we knew the road here to access and transport equipment, drugs, and people was really bad and would not allow for a fast deployment. I remember calling my headquarters on a Thursday for a helicopter. That's how we're in MSF, agile in a way. We have a special unit dealing with air transportation. And on the Saturday, we were having an helicopter flying from Miami, Florida to Port-au-Prince. And this really allowed us to respond quickly. So through these three, you see that the transition is really impressive. I think at the time we've been scaling up by 10 the amount of staff that we are to deal with this outbreak. Something I didn't say, but how to manage a cholera outbreak. It's about, there are some similarity with COVID. It's about having data in record time. You need to understand how the disease is developing, which direction it's taking, in which part of the country it's going, what are the different populations that are being contaminated against others. So it's about having record data in record time. And why is to react in record time. When you're exposed to the bacteria of cholera, you can have the first symptom within 12 hours to 5 days. It is really fast. And when you have the first symptom, you can die within 2 hours. So this is typically a type of intervention where MSF, we really need to be fast. You can't start to have a plan over weeks and months. It's about reacting really fast. And the reaction is about to stop the routes of transmission. There might be some similarity again with COVID, because it's about the same that all of our government are trying to do. The transmission is different. I really insist in cholera, it's about what we call oral fecal. In COVID, it's airborne, so it's completely different. But the principle is the same, to stop the route of transmission and to cure the infected patient. And how do we do that? This is an illustration of what we call a cholera treatment center, where we build it up completely, either with tents that we're flying into the country, or we can build infrastructure. It can take actually a few days up to a week to build a center, but you really need that structure to be built really quickly. Again, allow me the comparison with COVID, because it's in the air, COVID. You can be isolated or be in quarantine at home, even if you have mild symptom or slightly sick. In cholera, you cannot afford it. All the patient needs to be clearly isolated and to really stop the transmission. So it's a lot of work, it's a lot of resources, and one needs to be really fast. And then, because one of the routes of transmission is through water, dirty water as we call it. In cholera, we need to produce a lot of clean water, drinkable water, to clean, to disinfect constantly the places. And first and foremost, to bring clean water to drink, to rehydrate patients. Cholera patients will have a high level of dehydration. They will actually die from dehydration. It's what we call acute diarrhea. I'm sorry for that. I need to be. So you really need to rehydrate patients. So it's a lot of water. And here again, this is a picture of, this is our team who've been building all of that. And you need to build that in a record amount of time. It's been one of my most intense missions. I think I still have colleagues telling me, "Oh, Alan, I remember when you left the mission, you were exhausted." It was 2 months, 7 days a week, no days off. I wouldn't say 24/7. It was between 12 and 16 hours a day. And most of my colleagues have been working like that. So really, really exhausted. And then what happened after these 2 months is I fly back home and I make a stopover in Brussels, which is one of our headquarters in Europe, for a debriefing, which we do very often. And then something happened. I don't know how, I don't know what really happened, but basically during these couple of days I spent in Brussels, someone puts on my desk and in front of me a very fake report, which was an evaluation and a capitalization of the previous major cholera outbreak MSF had been dealing with, and it was in Zimbabwe. I think it was 2007 or 2008. And I'm being first, of course, tired, but I almost had an explosion. I don't know, I was ashamed. I was like almost pissed off. Like, how is it possible at the end of my mission that you're now giving me that document? Literally in that document, there was a lot of lesson learned that could have inspired me, could have inspired the team. We could have been basically going much faster. Why? Because these two contexts, it was a similar disease, of course, and there are specific know-how that do apply, and there was similarity between the context. So I was not really pissed off at others, but I was also pissed off and sorry, I was not happy with me. Why I didn't think about it? Why I didn't think of, while going into the plane, going to Haiti, doing the research myself within our system or within my friends and colleagues to find out as much information as possible. I had no experience with cholera before. I had been on war zones, on malnutrition, on many other type of intervention, but never on cholera. So really a mixture of shame, of being angry. How is that possible, basically? Just a short conclusion on that. As I said earlier, we are very self-critical in MSF. We constantly criticize ourselves. We still succeeded. Just a few numbers. Is in January 2011, we had treated more than 60% of all the cholera patients in the country. Of course, we were not alone. We were first and foremost the national colleague, doctors and nurses from Haiti. The Cuban doctors, amazing Cuban doctors, they fly all over the world, but they came in numbers to help. We needed a lot, and many other organizations. But imagine 60% was we took quite a big load. And in February 2011, we had treated more than 110,000 patients with a fertility rate lower than 2%. And now, without being too technical, but the fertility rate is really, out of the 110,000 is how many people died, was basically 2% in our structure, that we didn't manage to save them. Fertility rate on a cholera outbreak can go up to 10 to 15%. Now, what does that mean? Is that, and I'll go to that now, later, sorry. But I think we failed also, sorry, is that we could have made operational knowledge accessible faster. This is what I meant by this kind of data moment when I realized that, my God, this document should have been given to me earlier. I should have had access to previous learning and knowledge earlier in my assignment. So that we could have made it much faster. We could have made more knowledgeable workforce available on time. Actually, a lot of the experienced people dealing with cholera in Zimbabwe were not available to then be deployed in Haiti. I had very few. I remember one colleague who had been, including my partner, by the way, they had been in Zimbabwe during the cholera outbreak. But in proportion, the amount of people experienced with cholera was very little in Haiti. So that's a constant challenge we have in our organization, to make sure we use the workforce and we can have the mobility. What went really fine is only after a couple of months, we started to see national colleagues from Zimbabwe flying from Zimbabwe to Haiti. But imagine that Haiti is a French-speaking country. So if you're a national Zimbabwean and you come to Haiti and you can't speak the language, it's not easy. We still managed, and they really help. But anyway, it didn't go as fast as I wanted to have it. And then going back to the previous numbers I gave you, basically for MSF, if we had been faster, if we had had a better, I would say, learning culture and have access to that knowledge earlier, we could have decreased maybe the fertility rate of 0.1% or 0.2%. And what that means, out of 100,000 patients that we took care of, means hundreds of lives saved. And the more patients we would actually have saved, the less other people they would have contaminated themselves. So, so for us, how learning is critical and pivotal in MSF. It's really about a specific know-how on specific disease, definitely, but it is connected to a very contextual knowledge. Cholera in Zimbabwe has similarity with cholera in Haiti, maybe less within another context like Congo, for example, like Pakistan or other nations, but it is really important. And then where it's really critical is the learning do happen between people and not in a classroom, not even a virtual one. It's really about that knowledge and that expertise. I don't know if it's a bit of the end of the first stage, but what I would like to do now is take that kind of experience, but back to the context of MSF. And I want to take the opportunity, oh, there's a typo mistake here, to give you an idea of the organization, because then improving or investing in the learning of such an organization is not easy. It's important, but it's not easy. We have 6 operational headquarters. Why? I won't tell you the whole story of MSF, it's a long one. I mentioned the ICRC, which is a famous organization that some of you might know, the International Committee of the Red Cross. They have 1 headquarter in Geneva. I'm always sometimes a bit jealous because I'm thinking it's making their life a bit easier. But MSF, 6 operational headquarters, 5 in Europe, and 1 very recently. It's being developed now in Eastern Africa, between Abidjan in Ivory Coast and Dakar in Senegal. We have another 33 other major offices on the 6 continents: Latin America, South America, Northern America, Southeast Asia, Central Asia. More and more major offices opening on the African continent, including in South Africa, Nairobi also. So quite a lot, all about fundraising money, hiring people, and doing communication. And the workforce, as you can see, is quite a large one. It's 45,000 employees worldwide. And we deliver medical care to population in need of assistance in about 60 to 70 countries on average. So we sometimes compare ourselves to some kind of multinational global one in terms of volume and employees. And that's what we do. We provide medical care to population in need of assistance in this particular context: natural disasters, armed conflict, disease outbreaks, malnutrition, population displacement, forgotten disease, and what we call complex humanitarian crisis, which very often are a combination of all of that. Today, I can mention 1 context, which is one of the most complicated one, is Yemen, because you have natural disaster linked to climate, drought, you have conflict, you have outbreaks, you have malnutrition, you have population displacement. These contexts are really difficult to manage. I think it was important to give a bit of the context of MSF, because I know we're a known organization, but maybe just to put back the learning into that. So the learning in MSF is taking, like in many organizations, many ways. We have so many different fields: specialty, medical, non-medical, finance, security management, HR, of course. It's the learning as MSF is key. Now, besides that short story I shared with you, that happened 10 years ago. Things have changed a little bit since then. So what we're trying to do now is really to focus on people and teams. And how do we do that? It's really what I said, is to enable more knowledge sharing. And I think that can happen in the classroom, but in our experience, it's not going to happen in the classroom. It's going to happen in programs like Community of Practice. That's the most successful one that we have created. So it's a digital environment. The first communities of practice in our organization were created around very specific fields of logistic and supply. Now, the big news is it's been very successful. And now, just a month ago, we created a new community of practice for HR specialists. And there's not much I can tell you about because it's just starting. So I'm really looking forward to be part of these communities and make it be a success. Something which I've been part of is really to, again, linked to focusing on people and team, is really to increase all this activity of mentoring, coaching, team coaching, and peer-to-peer program. Very few numbers, but now MSF, I think we're, to my knowledge, we are one of the biggest internal mentoring and coaching program in the non-for-profit. And I know we're inspiring others. I'm also in contact with colleagues running coaching projects for UN organization, and it's also growing there, which is really positive. But mentoring, we have 500-600 mentors now. MSF also, we have, I think, about 60 coaches. It's an internal pool that we educate ourselves, and also ex-MSFers or MSFers educate themselves and then join the pool of coach. We're really investing in team coaching and more into peer-to-peer program. That's really a strong investment. But again, it's focusing on people, on teams, and maybe going a little bit away from this famous 10%, you know, the model 70-20-10. I think 10 years ago, MSF was investing 90% of its L&D capacity into this 10%. It was only classroom, literally. So easy to say it was nonsense. And now we're really shifting. I think we're getting more and more stronger into this 20%, learning with, from others, and we're continuing to invest. What we're trying to become better is mastering technology. So that's a big word, because I don't think we will ever master technology. What I mean here is to create a unique source of truth. It's a strange concept, source of truth. I like it. I've learned it lately. I took a course on Coursera. Maybe some of you know Coursera. It's this international platform. And the course is done by GitLab. It's how to manage remote team. And I really encourage you to take that. It was quite a few learning on taking that e-learning. The concept here is the source of truth is relating to the example I gave you earlier. In 2010, there was no such a thing as a unique place in our digital ecosystem, in our environment, where I could just literally Google in a unique database for searching the previous capitalization and evaluation on cholera. We didn't have that. And now this is an ongoing work. I think, again, COVID has pushed us to increase because we're all going remote and digital. So that's really what we're doing now, is to have master all the technologies that really help us to create a unique source of truth, which will improve dramatically in the learning, I think. We're not there yet, just to be honest. To coordinate how many 5 to 6, as I said, major headquarters on doing that is a work, but it's happening. The main challenge is to provide access to knowledge and learning content equally to all. And how it will be tough on our organization, but we have been doing discrimination in our organization in the way we were giving access to learning to our population. I think 10 years ago, only 10% of our employees were having real access to the whole learning content, literally. And it was mostly Northern Hemisphere, European, who were having access to that content, or to e-learning, or to training, or to classroom training. So now we're really reversing that. It's a new concept in MSF. We call this global workforce. It takes time to happen, but it's really happening now. There's an illustration is the pool of mentors now, as I said, and the pool of coach is much more diverse now. Before, when I created the mentoring program in MSF, the first 100 mentors were mostly white male European, basically. So that's really mastering technologies is a challenge. It requires time, it requires investment. But I think to create this unique source of truth for the learning and making sure that all the access is available to all our workforce, 45,000, is a challenge, isn't it? Where we still struggle, and it's just a few minutes and I'm done, it's still creating the right environment for people to learn on the job. And that's maybe it's going to be a never-ending issue at MSF. We work, as I said, in VUCA environment, very unstable. So these are not the perfect environment to learn on the job. And then the last point, which I think is a shared issue with many other organizations in the for-profit, is the skill gap analysis. I think we're very late here. I think the competencies and the skills we need in 5 years' time, most of them, we don't have them today. And then beyond everything I mentioned above, focus on people and teams and mastering technologies, we have, as an organization, to do this skill gap analysis and continue to identify and invest massively in our learning, because we're not there. We're definitely not there. So my original question was how can we save even more life? It's going to be pretty basic, but yeah, by constantly developing and investing in our learning culture and focusing more on people learning from each other. So maybe not a big news, a big discovery for all of you here, but for MSF it's been. We were just 5 years back, a majority of our learning were training catalogs, and 95% of this training were in a classroom. We were flying people all over the world just to take a training for a week, whether it was in South Africa, because we have a training unit in South Africa specialized in HIV and other type of disease and programs, or to Japan. I've been flying to Japan to train people, for example, and to Canada. So now we're done with that. So, and we're shifting more on people learning from each other and using the virtuality of things. I don't know if you have, maybe let's go just, if you have on that show, I can stop the slides maybe. And if there are any common question on this short story and I shared with you and where we stand in our learning in the organization. I can see Mike. Oh, yeah, there are some questions.
Maybe we can let people off mute there, but there's one question in here from Ian. Is the source of truth, or maybe Ian, you want to present your own question? Can we put
I'm happy for you to read it. Yeah, well, I can read it. Source of truth, trying to understand what it is, because if it's situational awareness, I can understand it. But if it covers that other aspect of how can you agree on what is the right medical practice when there are so many different points of view?
Yes, the source of truth is an interesting concept. I think it's more of a how to say. I really mentioned the source of truth in the story I told you. We need to, as an organization, as a global organization, we need to make sure that everything we produce, all the knowledge is accessible in one location. It's kind of more of a physical concept. I mean, 10 years ago, we were having already 30 offices, but all the knowledge was on servers, physical servers. Now the technology is that we have the cloud, okay? But besides that, it's just making sure as an organization, everything is more the concept of accessibility. Now the source of truth for doctors, you can put 5 doctors around the table on one patient that might disagree on the symptoms and on the treatment. So in that sense, I agree with you. It's not, yeah, it's not the meaning of truth. Maybe, yeah, I see your point.
Well, it's information driven, so I understand that it's getting the access to as much information as possible that you could need.
Today, and it's improving. In my experience, being in the field in the past, but now in the HQ, we still lose a lot of time by not having the right organization of knowledge. And I see it having clearly an impact on our learning. So I think it's more of a structural issue for our organization. I mentioned it to you when we're highly complex, six headquarters. We're working on it. There's a lot of internal debate to change the structure of our organization. I think we're amazing, but 6 headquarters, 33 different offices. If you don't have a unique source of truth for learning, I think it's a problem. I've seen there were many other questions actually, but I don't know in which order to take them.
Yeah, there's a few up here. There were comments as well on creating that kind of agile ecosystems. So to be able to respond to complex missions, you need to have an ecosystem's agility. So how do you kind of bring all those things together to get them to that place that needs them?
I think we have, that's the strength of MSF. We have some element of the agility we have. We're one of the few organizations that can deploy 100 tons of equipment and tens of experts or staff from all around the world within 48 hours. I remember the big disaster of the tsunami in Indonesia. I was there also, or others. We have some agility, but this agility has limits. So we have some element of agility, but I think now that we can even be more agile and go even faster just because of the technology, to be honest. Now, something I didn't mention, but there are many other examples I would give. We've been investing massively in telemedicine. So telemedicine is a huge technology, and then, I mean, you can, a doctor in Canada, actually it's Canada managing that project for the whole movement. You can support a doctor and actually help a doctor anywhere in the world doing an assessment of a patient. And so telemedicine is massive, and also for learning. So not just for helping, taking care of the patient, but also for learning. So we are constantly investing in increasing that agility, definitely. Yeah.
Cool. We have a comment from Neha. Do you want to come off mute, Neha? Or
yeah, sure. I'm here and I'm listening very intently. And so, Alain, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I'm familiar with MSF. I looked at them about 5 years ago for my own doctoral work on agility. So it was great to have this recap again. And while you were speaking about the single source of truth, I just wanted to share one thing that I've seen in a company, albeit a very small beverage bottling company in the north of Germany. What they did was they actually have a sort of a database where people post questions or ask for expertise, and they allow anybody to comment on it. So everybody from the drivers, the lorry drivers of this bottling company, to the janitor, to the CEO. And when I was told this, I said to Uwe, I said, this would never work. I mean, everybody would be giving their 2 cents worth, you know, this kind of comments that we see on newspapers and things like that. And he said, no, actually, no. He was amazed at how disciplined people were, because they knew that this was their, I guess you would call it, their source of truth in the organization. And because people were so focused on the mission and the purpose of what they're doing, they're very respectful of that space. So just an idea of something for you to play with, that maybe you don't have to have such a structured, focused single source, but maybe it can be a more diverse, there can be a more diverse element. But that was not my question, actually, Alain. I was just inspired by listening to you earlier on. I was more interested in understanding how, you correctly said it's difficult to create an environment where knowledge sharing is day-to-day business. I think that is for many organizations. And at the same time, we know knowledge is kind of central to agility. So I was wondering, what kind of initiatives have you taken to try and promote that and nurture so far? And what has been your experience with it?
Yeah, and I said we were still struggling on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that.
For me, I can take an example, not even relating to our team being deployed in the field. I can take an example of my team here in Norway and my colleagues. The thing is that it's in the job description, is what people are supposed to do. We as an executive, we need to be role model and show and demonstrate that we are learners, and we dedicate some of our time in learning. For me, it's the starting point. And if we do that, then I think the way we build our teams and what they're supposed to do and what they're doing, I can see, for example, it's not yet in their job description that 5 to 10% of their time should be dedicated to learning. So I'm processing that with my team, the executive team in Norway. I would like to improve the learning and development policy that we have, create a basic envelope for every other employee, that they can have access to either MSF content within our learning management system or external platform like Coursera, for example. And that's the minimum. Well, the critical point is not so much about the cash to allow them to do that, it's the time to do that.
Right, and because the leadership support, right?
And that's the main problem in the field. That's why it's a bit more complicated in the field, because in the field, you're dedicated to make a shortcut to save life. But depending on the role, we have specific program we're actually teaching. We have one new project which is huge. It's called the Medical Academy. So now we're investing in training national staff through university program and so on. But sorry, back to what I said is I think the most critical is to clearly identify an organization, and for every one of us, in my working time, 100%, I will dedicate 5% in learning. And then we make the time. We make sure that this is people can actually do it. I can give you another example that can illustrate. In the COVID time, in Norway, we decided to allow our employee with 30 minutes per day, paid, where we asked them not to work, but walk, go outside and do some exercise.
Right, great.
Well, we realized, yeah, I know, but we realized actually some people can do it because their workload or their pressure or whatever they have to do is okay, and allow them to do that. And others, they have so much work, actually asking them to take 30 minutes a day to walk outside is actually giving them more work at the end of the day and create more stress and tiredness and so on. So it's the same about the learning. It's us, the leaders, to create that environment.
Right, so you'd have to reprioritize, right? If somebody's telling you that adds to my, going for a walk adds to my workload, which sounds so weird, but okay, you know, you'd have to say as a leader, as a manager or team lead, you'd have to say, okay, then that means I don't need that particular item tonight by 6.
Exactly.
You know,
and that's a dilemma we're facing, both, right. I think, on dealing now with COVID. But I think we try to do a lot. But it's the same dilemma in terms of learning. Is you can't just say, oh, we need to learn, we need to invest, we need to do that. But if at the end of the day we don't make it happen, we don't allow people to do that. And I cannot just expect people to do that at the end of the day.
And the same applies to sharing, right?
Yeah.
People will only share when they feel the value of them taking their time to share something. If their opinions or input is ignored, that's not going to work. Yeah.
I think this maybe relates then to a point from a Fika. Fika, did you want to come in on that? It was, did I put you on the spot?
No more so than you usually do, Meg. Yeah, it was really just around the idea of, you know, helping people learn on the job, as you spoke about, Alan. Sorry about that background sound. And how it must be quite difficult having people, you know, learning on the job, when the reality of the matter is, with the work that you guys do, it's very much people's lives at stake, quite literally. And so you get that really tough balance, because you're trying to give people the experience and exposure in certain instances, but at the same time,
we may
make
have
a mistake, really, when you're dealing with other people's lives.
No, I agree. I've been in a situation where it was, we had to take decision, and taking the decision was a learning process, and people, the life of the patient was at stake in the coming 2 hours. So it's true, it's not, and I'm a non-medical people, so I think maybe some of you, I don't know if there's medical people, but for the medical people, that's what they're dealing with constantly. They're more used to that. But and how, as an organization, to create that environment, a learning, it's yeah. And that makes me think of a previous question that was asked by, I don't want to make a mistake in pronouncing it. Nadezhda.
I guess it's me, Nadezhda.
Yeah,
right.
no, I really like it. What's the ratio of proactive, preventive versus reactive learning?
Yeah, I just can say that the background of this question is that many organizations are struggling with the proper balance, because at the very heart of organizational resilience is the balance of these two types of learning. So I'm just really curious, how do you balance out these capabilities?
I'll be honest, I don't know. I think we tried that's where we're still struggling on how to prepare well all our employees into fitting them with the knowledge on the organization and to specific context. That would be all the preventive and proactive. I still think today, from what I presented to you, a lot will be reactive learning, I must say. The main issue is that and as a mentor or as a coach, not as a coach, as a mentor, if I talk to one of my mentees, I can give him that example of how our team dealt with cholera in Haiti. But there is no way he or she can copy paste exactly what we did for another outbreak in Congo. Everything is so particular and so different. It can be inspiration, it can inspire, but it will always be completely different. So, very good question, and I think we haven't found the right ratio, to be honest. We're still in that transition, as I said, shifting from the in-class learning and towards much more virtual and focusing on people and teams. I think it's a good balance. I don't think we've found it yet, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you. Just to share, and also playing into what Niha shared before, is that for agility in complex systems, we also need to look into structural agility, like structure enabling the flow of information, value, and other resources. And if anything, if we look at nature and how nature organizes itself, is that the complex structures produce simple behavior, and simple structures produce complex behavior. And for your purposes, my assumption is orientation on the field is the most complex behavior a human being can expose. So, and having the simple structures like network-based, like Niha described, I think is something that might be an interesting to look into.
What is interesting is on the major disaster I have been working in, I found our complicated and complex organization as one of the most efficient. But it's going to last the same, it's going to last for a month. Our focus is saving life. If you go into a natural disaster like an earthquake, you can save lives within 10 days maximum. After that, you're not saving a life. After it's about rebuilding a health system. We're really good at that. And we might be complex, but we have one common goal, saving life, and we all do it well. With very little communication, we just split the work, we help each other. After a month, it's becoming something else. then the complexity takes over again. and like any organization or like any company, there is internal politics that comes into play. Alan, you mentioned that the focus on learning has also shifted from in-class to personal learning. What are your challenges there? Specifically, do you have a way of figuring out who has the knowledge that someone else in a similar situation might need? And that's from Antoinette. The thing is, I think we have the same challenges. I'm realizing I'm not going to split the room then, because there's some really interesting questions. It's related to the group I wanted to create anyway. It's all about the learning. We have 10 minutes left. I think it's a similar challenge. We were planning to do that. We had started that shift, and basically COVID just pushed us to do it much faster. So that's the main challenge, and what's what I meant by mastering technology, because we're being pushed to master all this the person-to-person learning requires, how to put it. I think we were planning to do that over a few years, and we've been pushed like really fast to be optimal now. What happened, for example, last year is we were training. It was the team I was running before. We were training all the mentors in MSF, and as I said, I've been traveling to Canada and other places to do that. Because of COVID, they had less than 2 months to transform a 3-day accredited training by the EMCC into a virtual training, which now is, you can't put that in 3 days because you get nuts 3 days in front of a screen, but they moved that into 2 weeks. So now it's the same amount of hours, and now we're doing the same we're going to do the same with coaching education. We're going to do the same with coaching skills training. So that's the thing. Peer-to-peer is all the same. So it's all about adapting, mastering the technology so you make it available. I think it's just normal challenge that we're all having, adapting to new context. I wanted to, on what Nadezhda said, it was also that the community of practice are really working well on that. And they were born anyway out of a virtual world before COVID anyway. And I was skeptical myself also. I think the first community of practice we created in MSF were closed after a month. Again, learning by doing. But people, I think we learned to set up the framework. But the first community, people were just, I think there were some people maybe almost insulting each other. You know, basically, just what you know about this source of truth. Oh, but no, you don't know. I know better. So we've learned, and now these communities are really working well. And again, it's about the mindset that has changed, and it took time to create that mindset of learning from others.
And maybe a question on that. How did you create that mindset to allow people to not insult each other, to respect each other in those communities then? How was that created?
I think learning by doing, trial and error. I think that case was there's no way we would have done it perfectly anyway. I think another part of the success, it might be a bit of a buzzword, but I think it's the diversity that came out of it. I think today one of the success of the community of practice is not the communities are not mostly made of European. It's really global practice. And after, I think it just took time. I think it just took time. And the example I gave you of this Zimbabwean colleague is an expert in water and sanitation. And when he came to help us in Haiti, that was just a demonstration. He had the knowledge. He was from Zimbabwe. He was not talking French or Creole as they speak in Haiti. So I think we have increased the mobility in our organization, the physical mobility. We have increased the virtual mobility, I would say, by creating these communities. So it's just been a learning journey, as simple as that. I don't think there's any kind of recipe, to be honest. And there's been flops, there's been ups and downs. Now the mindset in MSF is really changing, that we really see diversity as a strength when we are historically very Eurocentric organization. There are, I won't say all the detail. We have very strong internal debate in our organization today on racism or discrimination. It's tough. So sorry for answering that way to your question, but I think one of the successes we're trying to increase the diversity. We recognize that it's really making an impact. Because my colleague from Zimbabwe was much better skilled than me to deal with water and sanitation in Haiti than me coming from Norway or from France. Simple as that. So that's the thing. It takes time. It takes time. And I don't know. Maybe we're just halfway. We're just halfway, I think, in that process. I wanted to. The question I wanted to ask and have in group, and maybe I can send it to you now, is much more, as I was trying to show, and I don't know if I succeeded, what was pivotal in our learning was really the knowledge sharing. And then how it's pivotal is because the more we share knowledge between people or colleagues, I give you the example of reducing the fatality rate and then saving more life. Now, this is very typical of MSF or medical organization. I don't know in your context if you have any other example where the learning is also creating that critical impact, pivotal impact on your business model, on your strategy. So I don't know if you have any example here, really related. If you, yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to share one of the metrics used to assess customer centricity as one of the pillars of business agility. At least the one that I know of, is the amount of handshakes to the customer, to the actual customer. Essentially, each employee of organization should have direct access to the customer, or the minimum handshakes in between for decision making. I don't know if it answers your question, really, but this is the learning. Like, do we really know our customer, or are we basing our decisions on what the customer wants and needs, based on someone said something and the information gets lost? So the typical example here is that lots of information around from the customers is learned by the front staff, as opposed to decision made on the strategical level and then cascaded down to the front line. So this is at least one of the ways to learn, is to ensure access and to minimize the distance to the customer.
So here the cases was on learning was training the staff on how to connect physically with the customers and have direct contact with the customers, correct? Yeah. If I may, it reminds me another maybe famous example that some of you know is about the Disney park, fantasy park in the US, all over the world. They realized that training the staff, all the staff, including people cleaning the venue and everything, on how to talk and people while they're queuing for going to the next. So they found out that that was really critical in the way it was in increasing the experience of well-being or being taken care of while you're waiting. But that was having a tremendous impact on your experience outside of the Disney park. So it's just really amazing how very simple details can make a difference in the end.
I think maybe one of the places we see where learning would be a benefit is especially in the skills gap. In all businesses, when we try to make them more efficient, we encourage them to share knowledge, to work together across silos. And those gaps in knowledge, skills, and experience are what hold every business back from performance, from getting to that high performance as an organization. There wasn't a question in that, really.
Yeah, that's not a question, but that reminds me, Evan's law of agility is that the organization is as agile as its least agile department or function. So thinking about the theory of constraints here, so maybe something to look into as well. In terms of organization, but also about learning and the pivotal role it plays is some companies who are very successful in cross-pollinating knowledge across the whole organization, they use 360 onboarding, meaning any role you're stepping into to work in an organization has to spend some time hands-on working in, and they always start with customer support, talking about frontline and really getting to know the pains of your customers. Another company probably heard about this, GitHub. They say if your customer feels the pain, you have to feel the pain. This is the way they actually keep up their high-class engineering culture. So this onboarding of spending time, for example, in each of the organizational departments or functions, first gets you really good sense of what is going on and that we're all in this together. But also helps to see with the freshman eye, you know, when we're around, we get the blind spots because we've been working on this for so long. Well, by historical reasons, we were doing this because we were no longer as critically assessing status quo. But when the freshman starts, they have lots of questions. And this is where you can leverage this.
I think, Afika, you had quite a statement there as well.
I did, and I chose to type it in out of the interest of time. But just quickly, you know, the conversation around knowledge sharing, it's been quite critical in our business as well, because we're a consulting firm essentially, and we have various different lines of business, and all of these lines of business are aimed at delivering to the client and really putting the client first. But what we found is when we work in silos, other lines of business are doing. You don't know what has already been used, lots and lots of time, reinventing the wheel sometimes, even duplicating work when we should be focused on delivering to the client themselves. So even stated things like communities of practice and communities of interest, just to get an idea of what everybody else is up to. And granted, it's not always in our wheelhouse or our forte, but already now as someone in human performance, I'm well versed in what process innovation is up to, our risk analytics and sustainability areas are up to. And I can already with those, with that knowledge, have those conversations with clients to see how best we can help them. And that feeds into how I formulate the different solutions that come up as a consultant on a particular client site. And so you start to see how important the sharing of knowledge becomes, not just for yourself, but for how you can help your clients as well.
Thanks, Afika. I see we have Athen Cozy has his hand up, so maybe the last thing before we close. If you want to come off mute, yeah.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Are you able to hear me? Sorry. Cool. Well, I'm still a student when it comes to business agility. I've just joined IQ Business, just like Africa, this year, and I'm currently in the learning and development part of it. And I was just caught by surprise by someone who mentioned Ivan's theory of constraints, because I was looking at it just today. And part of what the list of constraints speaks about is how, if you are going to be working on becoming more agile, you should expect to have more constraints. And I feel like what I've also seen in terms of other companies is that they get to a point of facing constraints in their way of operating. And then they get to that point of, well, you know, we tried agile and it didn't work. And so they stop there. And so I'm just very interested in how the Business Agility Institute did a report currently, I think the 2021. And one of the things it mentioned is how, in terms of the success of business agility, part of it was collaboration and communication. So I was very interested, Alan, in terms of dealing with the constraints that you face within the healthcare system. How are you putting certain strategies in place to enable collaboration and communication? So to deal with the constraints, are you currently doing that? And in what ways are you doing so? I'm very interested in that, because in the report, it was found to be one of the successes of implementing business agility. Thank you.
If I understood your question at Nkosi, it's within MSF, we're trying to do that. And the main problem, I think I mentioned it before, it's I know of many teams trying to be more agile in Brussels, in the field, but it doesn't work for what you said, is creating all the constraints. The main issue for MSF is we started by the wrong side, and our organization is far too complex in its structure. So we're hoping, we're working on it. Both, remember the MSF is an association first, before being an organization. So we have different level of debate and discussion to reorganize the structure, because we reach such a level where any one of us can decides to become more agile. It's not going to work. We need to start by the structure. It's such a complicated structure for decision-making process and for communication. So we're, yes, too much constraint now. and if we want to be more agile, we need to simplify things. Literally, we're at that level. Keep in mind the budget of the organization is 1.6 billion euro. I said 60 countries, 30, 40 major offices, 45,000 employees. So we went, like many on the for-profit, too complex. We're in the process of simplifying things, and then we can literally be agile. Now it's just, I just called a few years ago, we have middle managers. It's like, what's that? You know, you have leaders, line managers, middle managers. My God. So it's a journey. We're there. We're trying to reverse that. I don't know if that answers your question, but we're aware of all the constraints. And we know that we need to be more agile, and that means simplifying things. Simple as that. Well, simple in words, but it's going to take time. Mike, maybe you want to close?
Yes, unfortunately, we're at time. So I would like to thank everybody for coming today and joining us, having a nice dialogue with us, between us. Alain, thank you so much for presenting. For those of you on the call, we will be running the conference next week, March 22nd. You can sign up at businessagilityconference.global. All proceeds from the conference will be going to Alain's organization, Médecins Sans Frontières. Everybody organizing this is actually a volunteer, and all speakers are giving their time for free. So we'd be happy to see you all come along and support a wonderful cause, as you've seen from Alain's presentation today. Alain, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks, Africa and Antoinette, for your support. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.